is Indian Country Today.
Eskuli, yes, thank you for joining us. I'm Patty Thalohungva. Here are the headlines for Friday, October 16th. With the presidential election date just 16 days away, the Trump campaign launches a new coalition for Native American supporters. The president's son, Don Jr., traveled to northern Arizona to launch the Native Americans for Trump coalition. Navajo Nation Vice President Myron Lizer, who has met with the president several times, welcomed his son and greeted the enthusiastic supporters.
I love Trump. I love what he stands for. I love everything, all the things that he's done for the Native Americans.
Other Diné leaders in attendance included Elisa Martinez, who ran for a U.S. Senate seat in New Mexico earlier this year, and Lyle Ignace, who is a former Arizona state senator. Oklahoma Representative Mark Wayne Mullen also traveled to Arizona for the event. He plans on helping to campaign in Arizona in the last days before the election. Trump Jr. urged attendees to register to vote if they haven't already. The president's son pointed to the signing of Savannah's Act and assured the crowd that his father understands the importance of addressing the problem of missing and murdered Indigenous women. Trump Jr. says his father respects tribal sovereignty. He also gave him sole credit for the CARES Act funding allocated to tribes. Two Native groups hope to register enough Native voters to have an historic turnout across Indian country for this election. Illuma Native and Native Organizers Alliance held a virtual town hall and released a public service announcement to get Natives to register to vote.
It is extremely important that you are registered to vote and create a voting plan. You can go to nativesvote2020.com for helpful resources. Remember, every vote does count.
On the resource page, they even have information on each state's plan to ensure a safe voting experience in this pandemic. When the Alaska Federation of Natives formed in 1966, a few hundred people came to its convention, and today it draws more than 5,000 people. Like most Native conventions, this year is virtual due to the pandemic. The theme is Good Government, Alaska Natives Decide. Bryce Edgman embraces that theme. Edgman, who is Yupik from Dillingham, is the first Alaska Native to be elected to the State House and to serve as the Speaker. He gave the keynote speech, and in it, he says he sees more of that ahead. In the future, Alaska Native leaders will play a more prominent role in all levels of government in Alaska. We will have an Alaska Native governor, state Senate president, U.S. congressman, and U.S. senator. I know that time is coming, he said. The AFN convention is the largest annual gathering in the U.S. of Indigenous people. Clashes erupted in Santiago this week during a march to support the Mapuche, Chile's largest indigenous group. The march was part of the Two Worlds event held each year. The Mapuche attended the event to bring attention to many issues like recovering their ancestral lands. The demonstration followed a year of protesting in Chile, and it coincided with Columbus Day in the Americas. The demonstration began as a peaceful march in Chile's capital. Because the march was not authorized, police attempted to stop participants from advancing. This led a group of protesters to throw stones and petrol bombs at police, who in turn used water cannons to disperse the crowd. The Saginaw Chippewa Indian tribe in Michigan is bracing for trespassers as Halloween approaches, and they're asking for help. A spokesperson for the tribe says ghost hunters go to Mount Pleasant Indian Industrial Boarding School looking for a, quote, cheap thrill around the Halloween season. The school closed in 1934. Every year, the tribe asks for volunteers to camp at the school during the weekends in October. It's an effort to prevent vandalism and the blatant disrespect for the memory of those who attended the boarding school. The school opened in 1893, and about 300 students attended each year. It was initially thought the students were in grades K through 8, but more recent findings suggest much younger children were enrolled and forced to stay until they were adults. The boarding school was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 2018. And those are the headlines from Indian Country Today for Friday, October 16th. I'm Patty Thalohungva. When we come back, the rise of COVID-19 cases in Wisconsin. We'll talk to a doctor who's helping to educate Native families. Wisconsin is experiencing a spike in positive coronavirus cases. There are 11 federally recognized tribes in that state, as well as a large number of natives living in the urban areas there. The Gerald L. Ignace Indian Health Center is located in Milwaukee, and since the 1970s, it has served the urban Native population. The Urban Health Center offers medical, dental, and behavioral health services, and it also has a pharmacy and a fitness center. All of the services are provided in a way that respects cultural and traditional methods of healing. Dr. Lyle Ignace is the CEO. He's addressed the pandemic in a variety of ways, including holding weekly virtual meetings that are watched by hundreds of people. Welcome, Dr. Ignace.
Thank you, Patty. Thank you for having me.
Well, back in March, did you quickly understand the challenge this coronavirus would have on Native Americans?
Oh, absolutely. This was came to being a pandemic with the concerns as a provider, seeing previous epidemics before and impacts on reservations. This certainly came to the forefront as being very serious and an urgent thing that needed to be addressed.
So what did you see tribes in Wisconsin do in terms of closing their borders or immediately putting in stay-at-home orders or anything like that? Because we know that people living in urban areas are traveling back and forth from the cities to their reservations, and I think that for a lot of tribes, that was one way they could try to control and contain the virus spread by not allowing tribal members who did not already live on their tribal lands to come back home.
Specifically with traffic and commerce concerns and the transmission of the virus, tribes did what they felt was most urgent and appropriate.
And what did you see with your patients? Did they understand the gravity of the situation? Were they willing to go along with the CDC recommendations?
I think with the change in everyone's normal at the time, there was a bit of reluctance and maybe a lack of understanding and information out there. I feel once the CDC was able to get fully engaged in providing a public health message and approach, the information started flowing and people started to get a better understanding. But it took time for everyone to be on board, and that's to be expected. But we've tried every avenue and social platform to be able to get that message out to our Native community.
Well, it seemed to have worked because for several months Wisconsin was COVID safe or COVID free, but now we're seeing this huge spike, and you have actually put charts together to show that spike. What happened to cause that spike?
Yeah, so several things and probably a multitude of several occurrences happened at the same time. So in August, we obviously had a national discussion about going back to school. K through 12 was a big issue here in Wisconsin, and that certainly involved all of the tribal and educational institutions. We had people going back to college, so we had an insurgence of numbers as a result of kids going back to school. Obviously, all the institutions provided ways to mitigate this, but that was kind of the beginning part of the increase, followed by Labor Day weekend, and so it was the beginning of what we are now experiencing as the state being a hotspot.
And about that time frame, or I think maybe right before that, you started your virtual town hall, the Native Strong Town Hall. How has that been received? We've have done the Native Strong Town Hall specifically as a Native to Native discussion, information that is ongoing at the moment, and also being able to provide kind of up-to-date information in the Bemidji Indian Health area. So that's Wisconsin, Michigan, and Minnesota. And it really was just an effort to get out a message, how to help oneself, how to help your family. And we've been 25 weeks now, been doing this Native Strong Town Hall virtually live. And so it's important
I felt that our Native community, who may not necessarily have the internet or access to internet, or they may have access to maybe Facebook, but this was just an opportunity for Natives to have a forum and an open discussion about anything about COVID, and I'm more than willing to discuss that.
And what's the one question that people keep seeming to ask?
How to protect themselves, how to wear masks, what they should be doing for themselves when they go to the store, how do they protect their families. We've had some pretty interesting discussions in and around culture and tradition, around social engagements, powwows, even sweats. So it's an interesting discussion, and people asking and how we can work through it. Work through how to minimize the risk.
Wow, and that's certainly that has impacted pretty much every Native cultural ceremony this summer, that things have had to be canceled because of the fear of spreading the virus here. So when you're talking to someone about that, how do you alleviate their stress over missing a ceremony?
Well, I think the traditions that families may have, I at least acknowledge and reassure that they should rely on their own experiences, certainly with their families and with their respective tribes. And it's an important thing that people should continue with and find the best way to do that. So if that's wearing a mask, if that's hand sanitizer, social distancing, bringing their own utensils and items to what would normally be before COVID, they could still provide themselves that wellness without having to expend risk to themselves.
All right, and we are coming into the holidays, and not just the holidays, but Black Friday will be here before we know it. And is it safe to bring your entire family to go shopping on Black Friday?
Yeah, so just, it's going to be difficult. We all have our new normals right now. We all wear a mask. We all have hand sanitizer. We all understand the risk of transmission. I think that's going to be even more important for this upcoming holiday season, especially shopping and engaging in social events. It's going to be difficult, and just like much of what we're doing now should be continued even more so going into the fall, because it's not just COVID and the coronavirus, we're also talking about cold and flu season. So it's going to be equally important to protect not only yourself, but your entire family. So much of what we're doing now, continue doing, and with the holiday season, social engagements, get-togethers, dinners, I think there's going to need to be a kind of a limitation in how many individuals should that be in it, and I'm thinking it should be limited and pretty much to immediate family only.
Immediate family meaning just the people who live in your home with you.
Yeah, or it could extend to other families, extended families, but the risk again is you need this kind of reassurance that they're not at risk, or no one in the extended family has symptoms. If they do, they may have to find other ways, and maybe it becomes more of a virtual holiday season for families.
And that certainly is probably not something people want to hear, but for their safety and well-being, it's important. And you mentioned the flu vaccine. I've heard people who say they've never had a flu vaccine before, but this year they're going to get a flu vaccine. Is that your recommendation?
Yeah, absolutely. People can have the flu and they can have the coronavirus at the same time, and we know how impactful the coronavirus could be. We also know how impactful the flu virus can be as well. So it's really about minimizing individuals' risk and their risk of getting ill and having, being in the hospital and perhaps even worse.
And what is the long-term forecast for this virus? Are we going to be in lockdown or stay-at-home orders, in 6 months from now?
I think this is going to continue on for a while. Even if the vaccine does come available, we'll still be dealing with individuals who do not have immunity that will need to be protected, and this could be going on for quite a while, well into next year for sure.
And then any updates on the vaccine itself? Any idea of when that could be coming for not just the American people, but for also Indian country?
So, with the current administration and the strategic effort with Operation Warp Speed, there are several candidates up for approval, and the effort around the government to interacting with the public sector to create a vaccine, especially as quickly as these companies have, I think it's quite possible approvals could come before the end of the year. It may not be until after the new year where we may actually see vaccines available to that initial group of high risk and essential providers.
All right. Dr. Ignace, is there anything else you would like to add about the coronavirus cases in Wisconsin, or any kind of message to Indian country?
The impact that I'm seeing is not just in the area that I reside in the Bemidji area. It is really across the entire Indian country. And the impact we know can be quite serious. And we know from earlier in the year, Navajo Nation was deeply involved. The trends I'm seeing right now, especially with Wisconsin, being a hot spot, we have all the 11 tribes, but more specifically, we have tribes like Oneida, Menominee, Potawatomi, Sakagan, are deeply involved with probably the highest incidence rates currently in the United States are focused in these particular areas. And so it's going to be important as we move forward not to be complacent, and that we keep up this vigil of protecting ourselves and our families, wearing our masks, wearing our masks and hand sanitizer and social distancing as much as possible.
All right.
And we will get through this.
All right. Well, Dr. Lyle Ignace from the Gerald L. Ignace Indian Healthcare Center in Milwaukee, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you much. Thank you for allowing me to talk.
And we'll be right back. To say Jeffrey Gibson is an accomplished artist would be an understatement. He's Choctaw and Cherokee, and last year he won a MacArthur Fellowship, also known as the Genius Grant. Our correspondent, Carina Dominguez, spoke to him about his career and his monumental art exhibit on display in a New York City park.
Jeffrey Gibson has carved out a career in the art world. And that's not just because he's a sculptor or because his body of work reflects his Indigenous heritage. It's because he has a broad skill set, and his latest work is a testament to that and to his ability to bring worlds together. It's a part of the Monuments Now exhibit on display at the Socrates Sculpture Park in Queens, New York.
I didn't want something that you had to walk up to experience. I wanted something that when you entered the park, you could see it from a distance, you would know it was me, and it had to be bold and take up space.
His monument stands out against the Manhattan skyline. This Choctaw and Cherokee artist is known for using text in his work and being political, although he says it's not something he sets out to do.
I think I grew up with non-Native people having a very narrow definition of what Native people, who we are and what we do. And so I've always been determined to broaden that, but with truth. And I was determined early on. I was like, no, I'm going to be an artist. Like, I'm going to just make my work, and I'm just going to stay the course, and hopefully people catch up.
And people did catch up. Last year, he was named a MacArthur Fellow. The award includes a no-strings-attached $625,000 stipend, ample recognition, and credibility. His latest piece is making the biggest statement yet.
You're on our land, and we are still here in numbers too big to ignore.
The unveiling started with a land acknowledgement to several local tribes.
We are currently on the land of the Canarsie, the Munsee, the Lenape, the Shinnecock, the Rockaway, the Ronkonkoma, the Mohawk, and many others that have been erased by colonialism.
The idea for his art installation came naturally to him.
I thought about the mounds of Mississippian culture, and I've always been kind of taken whenever I share them with people that people think that they're like Mayan or Aztec or they're some other shape. And I'm like, no, these come from this continent. Like, these were the indigenous people here.
Without overthinking it, Gibson decided to pay homage to the ancient metropolis of Cahokia, which is believed to be the largest city in North America in the 13th century.
The admittance that there was a fully realized civilization here pre-contact is something that would radically change history, the way that we think about history. So I love to kind of bring that up.
In his early 20s, he worked at the Field Museum in Chicago and helped elders look at collections for items to repatriate.
And that was a huge education for me because I was just learning so much about other cultures. And that's where I came across Cahokia, and I came across the Mississippian culture. And then to learn that the Choctaw would have emerged out of the Mississippian culture was something that, it just sort of gave me like the next step in terms of like looking at Choctaw people and our history.
So when this opportunity came up, he drew on that knowledge, and he knew just how to take the exhibition to another level, or 3. His Cahokia-inspired multi-tiered structure was designed to be a stage. Jeffrey selected 3 indigenous performers to activate the space, like Laura Ortman, a violinist who is White Mountain Apache.
Is magical to me. She's somebody who just is one person, and she can like fill a universe with sound, and she really makes me like feel where I'm at, like I really physically feel like I'm standing somewhere, and this sound is just sort of like swirling around me, and it's sort of enveloping you.
It's set to be on display at a sculpture park near Boston next. His intention is to speak directly to natives and reverse roles.
I wanted to reflect those people, who identify as, or have been identified maybe as other, and kind of be like, here's a space for us.
Carina Dominguez for Indian Country Today.
October is National Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and one Native organization is raising awareness. The American Indian Cancer Foundation celebrated its 6th annual Indigenous Pink event on social media. Participants joined with the hashtag IndigenousPink and shared their stories. Breast cancer is the most common cancer among Native women. However, Native men can also get breast cancer. So the foundation is educating the community that all bodies have breast tissue and are at risk for developing breast cancer. Eating a healthy diet is recommended by the foundation, as well as reminding all relatives to talk to their doctors about early screening for breast cancer. For a list of events for the rest of the month, you can visit their website, americanindiancancer.org, or go to their social media. And that does it for another week. On behalf of all of us here at Indian Country Today, have a great weekend. And remember, take care of yourselves. Your life is precious. I'm Patty Tholahungva. We'll see you on Monday.
Indian Country Today is recorded at the Phoenix Indian School Visitor Center in Phoenix, Arizona.
This is Indian Country Today.